You are listening to the Enormocast.
Alex Honnold once said that being in Black Diamond's solution harness feels like home. And that's either a ringing endorsement from one of the best or a desperate cry for help. The royal we here at the Enormocast is just going to assume it's the former, because the latter is quite complicated. And besides, we climb in a solution too. Not a sport harness or a trad harness, it's the one harness that stays in my pack for everything, because it's comfy and svelte without all the extra muckety-muck. I mean, really, what's a full-strength haul loop actually for? Anyone? Neither Smoot or Holly can tell you why you'd ever want 2,000 pounds hanging off your ass while you're climbing. So feel like you're home in a cleanly designed, comfortable solution harness from Black Diamond. And check out all their soft goods at blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite retailer. Black Diamond, a proud sponsor of the Enormocast. So let's say you've taken the advice you've heard on the Enormocast and played it ice climbing cool with that special climbing friend, going on trip after trip like your family, even though you've had the hots for him or her since they burned you off your proj and flips in a ratty pair of Yojimbos from the Lost and Found. Well, if the perfect belay isn't conveying your longing, perhaps the climbing-inspired jewelry and accessories of Peter Gilroy will help you put the punctuation on that date that's not a date, might be a date, climbing date. At peterwgilroy.com, you'll find jewelry, money clips, belt buckles, hats, and more, all inspired by the rock in the mountains on which your love has flourished. So please, before you resort to the lean-in or the forgotten sleeping bag or the embarrassing confessional after a 12-pack around the campfire, try a classier approach with a spectacular gift from peterwgilroy.com. And if you crash and burn, know that Peter and Enormocast still appreciate your support, even if your partner does short rope you to the curb. And remember, enter Enormo at checkout for a discount. But keep that part to yourself.
We gotta get
Listen, where you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place
sold it
outside
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000 seats.
We really should run.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime is good for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is August 2nd, about 9 o'clock in the morning. Here in Carbondale, Colorado, 2018 still. Yeah, 9 in the morning. What's going on? I don't know if I've ever done one in the morning. Maybe, but usually it's late night. So here I am. I can do the old Mark Maron thing, where he drinks the coffee on air. In this case, my beloved Bonfire, formerly Defiant Bean. And then he says something about pooping, right? Anyhow, this is episode 156, which is part 2 of a conversation with artist, photographer, climber Dean Fidelman. If you want to hear about how this interview came to be and all that normal stuff that I put here, go back and listen to part 1. In fact, part 1, not quite essential to understanding part 2, but you might as well put them together. So if you haven't listened to the last episode, it's in your feed, part 1. Check that out and then come back for part 2. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Not talk about Dean ahead of time like I often do. Let's just get to the interview, except for, of course, the commercial. And go ahead and listen to part 1 first. It'll help. Good day. If there's one thing the Italians understand about this world, it's that if something ain't baroque, don't fix it. And that's why Sportiva has faithfully kept its tried and true venerable classics in the line. The Mira, the Solution, and the Testarossa still outperform the latest flash-in-the-pan shoes out there. And they're also still built in a European monastery by silent septuagenarian craftsmen who may or may not be lawfully entitled to 6 smoke breaks a day. So when it comes to shoe performance, what's it going to be, the latest or the greatest? Personally, I'll go with the greatest every time. So check out both the latest and the greatest at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. Sportiva is a proud sponsor of the Enormocast.
This art, like these old photos, they really touched this chord in me. And I thought, you know, that's your best work. And you made the work for the pure joy of making work. And then you tried to do fashion, or you did fashion or whatever, and music, but there was no joy, and you were chasing money. And then you went back to these climbing photos and making portraits of people, and, you know, like, and you're happy with that, but now you're chasing money again, you know, for your work, and I don't want to do that, and I thought, you know, what do you really want to do? And I thought, I don't know. I go, what do you really like? And I go, I think it was really high, and I may have been eating a Reese's peanut butter cup. And I thought about it for a second. I go, it's peanut butter and chocolate. I go, nude rock climbing. It kind of came to me in that way, you know, and I'd actually thought about it from the very first, and I thought this could be a really interesting thing, because I'd been making nudes, and they were, I consider them art nudes that I'd been making for years with, you know, models, girlfriends, friends, you know, and they're all black and white, and I'd been studying nudes since I started making photography, and as much as I had been studying climbing photography since I started making climbing photography, and I could see the tradition and the way you needed to do things, and so I felt I could do this. And also, it seemed like my best climbing photographs were bouldering, mostly on boulder problems that I had done, first descent or back or whatever. Just pictures of our friends bouldering. Those are always beautiful photographs because I fully understood bouldering and the environment, how it fit together. And then by that point, I understood photography fairly well with light. And so I decided to make these photos. And at that same time, Charles Cole had given me a camera of his to use. It was a Pentax 6x7. And I said, I want to make these climbing nudes. He goes, that's a good idea. I go, okay. And he goes, use my camera. And I go, cool, you know. And he goes, what else do you need? I go, I could use a little money. And he goes, I'll give you $2,500. So he did. And then I went out to Joshua Tree. I was living in Joshua Tree then at the Gordon Ranch. And I would see Jim Bridwell all the time, ever since I was 16 years old when I first met him. And he smoked all my weed and made me a Stonemaster, or made me part of SAR. I'd always seen him, and I would go down there all the time when I was living in Joshua Tree. So I went down there on the way back, and I said, oh man, I got this camera, I got this money to make these photographs, these climbing photographs, nude girls climbing rocks. I have this idea. And Bridwell goes, that's a brilliant idea, Bullwinkle. You know why? And I go, no, why, Jim? And he goes, because girls just love to get naked. And I was like, that never occurred to me, Jim. But I'll see if this happens.
It's not been my experience.
It's not been my experience.
Thank you, Jim.
But I did have photographs of some of the other nudes that I had done, which were mostly studio nudes in environment. So I showed some, I think, to Rebecca and Chelsea Griffey and a few other people. But Rebecca had trusted me enough because she had worked with me, you know, making photographs for 510. So yeah, she was fine with it, and she didn't even boulder that much back then. She was more of a venture climber and you know, racer and that sort of thing. But she made a photograph, you know, and I thought, gosh, you know, I hope that the body doesn't like stand out against the rock. I was thinking that maybe it's just not going to be right. I don't know how, but and when I made those photographs and I processed that film. Because film, like love, takes time, unlike digital, which happens in a moment. That's not love. Anyway, that's something else. Yeah. And I saw them, and I think I printed them up, and they were good. I thought they were really good. I mean, looking back in hindsight, my work has gotten a lot better. And so I go by the Lynn Hill adage, I will be better next time. So everything I'm always trying to be better at. It went from there. And she told other people at the Recreation Gym, and since they trusted her, there was this bond. And I also knew that, Rebecca and I were friends, but friends in the sense of the Stonemaster friends that I had, and all the climbing friends that I have, where you instantly trust that person, and in a very strong, much stronger way than perhaps a coworker or something. And so I think she trusted me, and we made these photos, and she was able to put that forward. And I realized that, and when I made these photos, the main thing besides struggling to make this photo and knowing the boulder problem and the light and all this stuff and getting the woman to climb it was trust. I knew that was the whole thing here was trust. And I knew that I was walking a path. And I felt, by this time in my life, this was like 40, 42. I knew that I'd been on a path. And I was going to do this. And I knew I wanted to make a book. And I knew I wanted to be the Stonemaster, but this was going to be my book, and I was going to do this for 10 years. This is 1999. And, 2010, whenever I'm going to make a book. So I understood that you had to totally respect the people you're working with. You had to keep your energy focused on making the photograph, but also making that person feel relaxed. And you don't make a woman who gets naked in front of you that doesn't know you feel relaxed by hitting on them or giving them any sexual energy.
Right.
You make them feel beautiful in that moment, and you make sure that they understand this is what's going on, that you're making this art together, and that these terms mean something, and that's how you're approaching it. And you do that simply by walking that path and being who you're going to be and making the photos. And so I liked it a lot, and everything. The first calendar was made in Joshua Tree, and then the second calendar was kind of Yosemite. And I met a really important woman in my life. Her name is Elizabeth Yu, and she was much younger than me. And we made some photographs, and she had been going out with a friend of mine, Cedar Wright, who introduced me to her. But anyway, we ended up in a relationship, and she kind of threw a lot of her energy into helping the calendar happen. Mm-hmm. She, is young, and she knew about the internet, and a super intelligent person, and helped get it to the point where at least I could sell calendars online.
Well, and that sounds funny to everyone now, but we're talking about the ground level.
Yeah, the ground level, 2000, 2001.
Yeah. And it has not been here forever. So.
When you had to be I think she was 23 at the time. You had to be 23 to understand the internet.
Yeah.
And totally. I had no idea.
Well, and and before we move on from that first calendar, I was working there.
Right.
And I think, like we were saying, several, if not most of the women in that first calendar either worked or climbed at that gym.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was interesting because, obviously when women look at pictures, a lot of women, men too probably, but pictures of themselves, they're a little self-conscious, and now they're nude, so they're very self-conscious. But the overall, I remember distinctly, the overall vibe was proud of what you had done and what they had done.
Exactly,
and
what we had done.
We were all very casually looking at these photos and being like, wow, that's amazing,
Yeah.
And it was, because there's, and we can talk about that, this path of trying to make sure that people understand this as this artistic thing you want to do. And that's, climbers are a bunch of immature, and it's just, it's fun and,
it's
snickery
fun.
and everything else. And there's definitely things to be made fun of in there and stuff like that. But I just definitely remember everybody being like, wow, this is really nice. And the women being quite proud of what they'd done and how it looked and how you'd made it look. So,
and it's continued. Right up to this day, it's continued that my job as an artist and a photographer, whatever I'm doing here, is to, in my heart, is to love that person when I look through the camera. And I understand when you love someone in reality or something, your vision changes. That their face looks different, their movements, or the place. Like when you fall in love with Yosemite or Boulder, Colorado, or, the Black Canyon, or wherever you fall in love with that place, it changes now because you see it with love. Your eyes see that love. And so when I'm looking through the camera, I do love that person. And so when I see them, I'm looking for the most beautiful, balanced. And when a climber is balanced, they are beautiful, because that's what we climb. We strive for, is to climb in that balanced way, right? Whether it's overhanging or not, you're balanced and everything is pulling in the right way. You're going to look as beautiful as you possibly can. So you're going to get joy out of that movement. And so I found that my whole thing was to set the environment, which is a landscape, make a landscape basically with a boulder in it, and let the woman, her body's going to mimic that landscape simply because she's climbing on that landscape. And if she's balanced, that means that she's climbing with the holds given by that landscape. And she's going to look beautiful because the landscape looks beautiful and the light looks beautiful. And that's what happens. And she feels that. And she's not looking at me in the eyes. I'm not trying to pull something out of her. I'm saying, climb, stop. And I get into down climb a lot too, because down climbing definitely looks different than when you're going up. And it's kind of an interesting experience. And I think seems like about 80% of the people who've done this, my models or my climbers, or I call them my collaborators, or my muses, which is a different thing, have said, one, they've never felt as comfortable around someone being naked, and two, that they really enjoyed the experience. They had a lot of fun and felt, very safe in making these photographs. So that's one of the things that's driven this 20 years forward. Mm-hmm. That, and like early on in the Stonemaster's, getting in a car with Backer and Tobin and driving to the Needles or driving to Colorado or just driving to Yosemite on road trip. And the anticipation when you're going to get there. And I love that. I love it a lot. And so in the last 20 years in Stone Nudes, I've gone kind of all over the world, and definitely all over the United States, to Colorado quite a bit, because I have a ton of friends here in Boulder. And I always love, putting the cameras in the car, and like with a half hour out and I'm smoking some dope and I'm driving down the road. It's a bad thing, but I realize that this is what I live for, because there's going to be some photographs on the other end, and I'm going to fall in love for a few minutes with that person. And then I'm going to go on to the next. And it's about climbing, and it's about a landscape that I love, which is the vertical and the rock. And it's about a community that I feel I have very deep roots in and a lot of respect for. And that was also one of my main things when I decided to start making photographs again. I go, what can I bring to climbing? And that is something that my mentors like Jim Bridwell and Backer and Glenn Danny and a lot of people have looked at me and said, well, Dean, what can you bring to climbing? What can you bring to climbing? And I thought I can bring art, because you can't have culture without art. And it seems like climbing is appropriated everyone else's art from all these other cultures. And I want something that comes up within, just like Glenn Danny, just like Tom Frost, just like all those other guys, just like Greg Epperson and Jimmy Chin and all, the whole, tradition. I want to bring this art to it. I want to make these photographs that are just for the sake of making these photographs, and they're not going to be selling shoes or harnesses or clothes or anything. And so that was part of that whole thing that brought me into the Stone Nudes. And the desire to make that Stonemaster book persisted. So
we're at the 20th anniversary of Stone Nudes. That one's not out yet.
No.
Okay, so and this will be the last, you think?
This will be the last. I'm doing a Kickstarter for that one.
Okay. And has there been one every year for 20 years?
Yes, there have. And there's been one best of. So there's been, but there was two in 2002. There was a men's and a women's.
Okay.
Because my friend Elizabeth, or my partner at the time, said, I want you to make amends too. And I go, okay. So I made amends, and it was all my friends, and it was a blast. But it was kind of scary because each guy wanted to outdo the other guy and be up higher off the ground, naked soloing. And it was a
Must
financial
have had a completely
disaster.
different vibe. Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that. I was like,
Great
how did
photos.
that one sell?
Not at all. I think I bought one, and then my mom bought one.
Oh, man.
Elizabeth was the one funding it. She was not happy at all.
All right.
But, and so, and within that 20 years, when the Stone Monkeys came about. So that's when, like the early 2000s, there was Cedar Wright and Dean Potter and Micah Dash and a host of other climbers that were living that lifestyle in Yosemite. And I was living that too. And I was making this calendar And that brought me this sort of cachet with everyone else coming in. Plus, I was still making my photographs of them. Very quiet photographs, just, portraits and hanging out. And then climbing photos with Dean, because Dean and I hit it off. And Dean helped me out. He was one of my best friends I've ever had. He's one of those guys like Charles, like Lynn, like other people that believe in you. And you can never have too many of those. And Dean, he believed in me really early on. I made some of the very first photos of him for Boreal and then for 510 and then onward. And, the Rangers were chasing us and we were bivvying out in the meadow and the Hoobers were there and it was like a big party. And all the Germans would show up and we'd all party with them. And it was a really cool energy and everybody knew I was doing this and everybody knew a woman that they wanted to see naked. So they would talk to her and then I would close the deal. And, and it was all just part of this really fun time for a very long time of all these young climbers, both men and women, making their mark in Yosemite, free climbing Yosemite walls, doing really hard solos, kind of like what it was like in the 70s.
Going fast.
And going fast. And that hadn't been happening since the 70s, in my opinion, in some ways. Though it was, but in so many numbers with such a dirtbag mentality.
Well, and also you were back to this group idea.
Right.
And you're right. I think you're right about the 80s in that it was, there was things happening, but we talk about these individual sort of giants.
Exactly.
Levitts and people like that, Randy Levitt. And so, it didn't feel like this collective. And then the Stone Monkeys felt, is that right?
Yeah, the Stone Monkeys came together.
They felt like a collective again.
Yeah,
so that was your place.
Yeah, that was my place. I felt really comfortable
Right.
just making these photographs and enjoying the second time around as much as I possibly could. Just because I knew that this was the second time around. And I was feeling so lucky. Right? You feel really lucky when you're in a situation. You go, oh man, if you can really see what's happening, you go, oh my God, it's come around twice. My gosh, here I am. Wow, I'm in my 40s now, and I'm the old guy here, but I'm living in the Meadow with all these other people, and we're just loving life, and I'm making these photos, and I'm making all kinds of photos, and sometimes someone wants to buy one, and I sell it to them, and I make these calendars. I never made any money on the calendars. Every calendar kind of lost money. A couple of them broke even, but it felt like it was part of my entire life,
right? Because
I would go to Moab in the winter, and Dean was living there with Steph. And all the monkeys would show up, and Sean Leary had a place, and we would hang out there, and then I would go to Boulder, and Lenny was here, and eventually Cedar Wright moved here, and so every place I was going, I was still dealing with monkeys and people that I knew, and I was sleeping on Micah Dash's couch for years, and Micah would call me up and he'd go, oh yeah, come to Boulder. I go, well, what's the weather like? He goes, weather? Well, it's been a bit snowy, but it's clearing up. It's going to be great. And I would get there, and he'd know full well it was just going to snow.
Right.
But he wanted me around.
Right.
And gave me a place to sleep, because maybe I'd be at my mom's place in Santa Cruz or my sister's or what have you. So it was all part of that life. And I would make photographs of them, and I'd make my stone nudes. And it was all really kind of not a lot of money, but enough to get by. And they would buy plane tickets for us to go places, And, and then like Jose Pereira died, and reality sunk in. And I was like, I was feeling good about everything. With the Stone News was going well, but I still wanted to make that Stonemaster book, because I kind of felt like those words, like what, and especially Birdwell saying, what do you have to bring to climbing, Dean? And I felt I had done something with the calendar, and I had worked with magazines and done a fair amount of editorial, and I liked that because they let me be Dean. And most, like Dwayne Raleigh at Rock and Ice, he just lets Dean be Dean. Just give me what you do, and we're going to be happy. And I don't even have to invoice him or anything. He just sends me the money. He knows Dean, and and others would figure that out. And this guy is not like the rest of them. He's going to make these photos whether you pay for them or not. You see,
he's going to make this podcast whether he pays for anyone pays for it or not.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Kind of my deal too.
It's part of exactly. It's part of your life, and this is what I decided is to make that part of my life. I wanted to be, and then that comes back from really early in photography school. There was this photographer named Alfred Stieglitz, and he kind of made the first American gallery in New York and exhibited American artists. Anyway, he was Georgia O'Keeffe's husband, who was an amazing woman painter, American. He said, you never have to leave your backyard your entire lifetime to make your entire body of work as an artist. You never have to leave your backyard if you don't want to. And I realized that the world was my backyard in a way. Yosemite was my backyard. Colorado was my backyard. Utah, all these places where people climb, where the monkeys were, my friends were, the friends of my friends were, was my backyard. And so I was getting a much fuller understanding of who I was and what I felt I could bring to climbing. And then I met Glenn Denny through Dean Potter and Jane Sievert, the editor of Patagonia, when Glenn was making his first book. And I saw the photos, really early on, all of them. I'd never seen all of Glenn's photos. No one had. And then I saw all these photos, and I was just, it took my breath away. Mm-hmm. Because this is the stuff that inspired me as a kid growing up. And here's all of them. Not only that, but Glenn immediately, he knew who I was. He loved my work, my calendar. And he immediately opened himself up to me in the process of how to make a book. Because I wanted to make a book, and I expressed that early on, and he allowed me to follow him through that process, and he invited me to his place in San Francisco. And as soon as I came in, I could see against the far wall there was all these photo boxes. I knew it had to have negatives and prints in them, right? And these are all his personal things because he's making this book. And I was there with someone else, and Glenn and that other person were talking, and I started to walk toward the far wall, and I see Glenn looking at me, and I got down on my knees, and I picked up a box, and I looked up at Glenn, and he's looking at me, and he just nodded, and then he turned around and continued the conversation, and I started going through all the boxes.
That's awesome. That's like a Bruce Lee moment,
Yeah.
The master gives you
the master just
signals.
Just a little nod of his head, and then he just turned around and engaged in the conversation. And so I saw, this very raw work and these shoe boxes full of negatives, and it was incredibly inspiring. So I called up John Long, and he had recognized my number by that time, and he just let it go to voicemail. And so I was like, a little frustrated. This is like 2007 or so, and I ran into Backer, and I told him about this book, and he goes, "It's a fucking great idea." He goes, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And then I didn't see him for another few months, and I get this call in the middle of the night, and it was Backer, and he's drunk, and he goes, "You got to make that book." He goes, "You're the only one who can make that book." And I go, "What book?" He goes, "The Stonemaster book." And I go, "Well, I need John Long to make the book with me because he's the guy who written all the stuff about the Stonemasters." And he goes, "Yeah, whatever. You're the only one who can make this book. You have to make this book." And then he hung up. And I remember running into him like 6 months later saying, I'm making this book. And he goes, "What book?" But so I gave John Long a call, and of course I didn't get anything back. And I was like, I need to manifest this book. I need to put that out there. So I started telling people I was going to make this book without even having an idea how I was going to make this book and if John was going to do it. And I continued making the calendar. And like in 2007, I got a call in the fall, and it was John. And he goes, "I got this publisher who's interested in making that book, the Stonemaster's book you want to make." And he goes, I have the time to make that. Would you be interested? And I thought to myself, I've been begging him. And now he's come to me. And I go, and now is the time to get some payback. Not even. Now is the time to take control of this thing. Because this is what you're born to do. I just felt it in that moment, on that phone call. And I go, "I'll make the book, but under one condition." He goes, "What?" I go, "We self-publish." And he goes, "All right." And so we had some meetings, and we had this really great chemistry working together on that book. It was amazing chemistry. He started digging up his old writings, and he realized that he needed some other people from that era to write stuff. So he started going after that. And I started looking through my photographs, and John had originally said, "Let's make it with my writings and your photographs. We'll make the Stonemaster book." Only that. And then he realized that there was other stuff out there that was really well written. And I started digging into stuff, and I realized that there was other photographs. And the way I did that book is the way you do these interviews. I got in my car, I called that person, I drove to them, I brought my scanner with me, I dug out the stuff from the garage, I scanned it, I organized it, I gave them a copy, I shook their hand, and I went home. And every single person was, when you do that, you build a force. You build this creative force because you're now bringing people into your art. And I realized that very early on with Stonemasters. One person leads to another person, leads to another person. And if you walk a path of respect, honor, and trust with your friends and with others, they will show you that. And they will give you what you need to honor their stories and your friends' stories and to bring it forward. And I realized the only way to do it, even in this digital age, is not through a text, but is to touch someone's hand or to go to someone's house, to sit there and take care of that. And to talk to that person. And so we made this book, and when it came to publishing it, so we make this manuscript kind of, we got all these photos scanned, and we've got all this text. The next step is you go to a designer. So Glenn Denny's book had come out the year before, and I really liked the designer, and the designer's name is Tom Adler, and he does surf books. So through my connections at Patagonia, I got his number, and I called him out of the blue, and he goes, "Who's this?" I go, "They gave me your number at Patagonia." He's like, "I got to talk to these guys." He goes, "What?" He goes, "You got 30 seconds. I go, "Okay, it's about rock climbing in the 70s, a group called the Stonemasters. I have words and text." And he goes, "Yeah?" He goes, "All right." He goes, "I'm interested." He goes, "How many words?" I go, 50,000. He goes, "How many photographs?" I go, 110. He goes, He goes, "How many pages?" I go, 200. I'm just guessing. Right? But and I go, he goes, "What size?" And I give him a size, and he goes, "Well, that sounds like a great book." And I go, "Yeah." And I can feel him opening up on the phone. I go, "Yeah, and I have these ideas for the layout." And he goes, "Oh, I'm not interested in your book." I go, "Huh?" He goes, "Well, if you have ideas, keep them to yourself. I'm a designer." I go, "Okay." I go, "No, I don't have any ideas." He goes, "Tell you what, come over here next week and bring me some money." And the photos and the text.
You're like, "Oh."
And I go, "Oh, damn." And I literally had like $600 or $700 in my bank account. And so I go, "All right." So I took out $500. I was living out in Joshua Tree. And I drove, he lives in Santa Barbara, and I was driving up there early in the morning. And I ended up stopping in Ventura and getting something to eat at the Vaughn store. And so I got some sushi or something, and I pulled over at this little pullout that's a public parking lot where people go jogging and such. And to the left of me was a BMW with a woman eating breakfast, I think. And to the right with me, a guy was on the phone, and he was eating something. And so I started to eat, and I had this old beat-up pickup truck at the time. And it looked like kind of a homeless vehicle because it was a climber's vehicle. And but I had been on this 2-year quest. I had all this material. I was going to this top-end designer, and he was going to give me a chance, right? And I felt really alive and really happy. And I felt like I was going to accomplish something in my life. And I look in the mirrors, and there's 2 cops with their guns drawn coming up the side of the car. And then they put it back in the holster, and they look at me, and they go, "Could you step out of the car, please?" And I go, "Well, what's the problem, officer?" I mean, the windows roll down. They go, "What are you doing?" I go, I'm eating. And like those guys are in the BMW and that woman over there. And they go, do you live in your car? I felt really kind of humiliated because sometimes I do, you know? And I said, "I don't think that's any of your business." They go, "What are you here for?" I go, "Well, actually, I have a meeting." And I started to vocalize what that meeting was, and I could feel in my throat that I was going to cry. And then they just sort of backed off, left me alone, and I ate. And I went and saw the designer, and he laid out all the photos and all the stuff. And he goes, "This is fucking amazing. Give me the money and give me a few days." And he came up with the rough first draft of the Stonemaster book, which was amazing. And at that time, Mike Graham from Grumici Products decided he was going to help publish the book. And so we formed this company, Stonemaster Press. And the book came out, and it was really beautiful. And I realized at that moment in my life that I think I had been making art for myself to satisfy me. And when that book came out, so many people came up to me and were so happy that I made that book. And that meant a lot. Like my friends, all my friends. They were like, congratulations. And I was like, what? The book, it's amazing. And I was like, huh. Because nobody had ever said that to me about any of my work. Stone Nudes, people call it porno, people call it this, some people love it. But when that book came out, that meant something to me. Very strongly, like, I think when Bridwell saw that book, he said, you gave something back. And I think earlier, too, when I first made the first Stone Nudes calendar, just to go a sidebar, I'd shown it to Backer and I said, I need money to publish this thing. And he looked at me and he says, how old are you? I go, 42. He goes, you're 42 and you don't have anything. You don't have a pot to piss in. You have no money, no house, no nothing. I go, I don't have enough to make the calendar. I don't have anything, no. And he goes, huh. Kind of laughed at me. And I kind of left. And a few weeks before he died, we were talking. Because, I don't hold things against people. If I love someone, I love them. I let things go. And he, I ran into him, a little bit before I called him, or he called me, and he said, hey, when I told you that you didn't have any money and I laughed at you? And he goes, I'm sorry. He goes, you have a lot. I think he was losing his house at that point. I kind of think he realized that money was not important. So he said, yeah, you have a lot. And that meant, and Bridwell telling me, hey, you did a great job on that book. Thank you. I think it keeps you going, and when you're working with your friends. But, we were all really happy. The Valley Climbers, the Valley Uprising was coming out, and I did a lot of work with that. A lot of my photos were in that. So you start to get, I don't get recognition outside of climbing, not like Jimmy Chin and, Greg Epperson, a lot of other photographers. I get this recognition within climbing, and I get this recognition from photographers. I'm kind of a photographer's photographer. Like, they all know my work. They've all grown up on it, and they love it, and it's inspired them, and their work inspires me. And other climbers, like pro climbers or top-end climbers, for some reason, they know I've worked with all these people over the years, and you have this instant trust and rapport and respect. That's not coming from the fact that I've never climbed hard numbers. It has nothing to do with that. It's coming from the fact that I'm a member of my community, and I give back as much as I can. So I've continued making books. I made 4. The last one was Yosemite in the 50s, the Iron Age. And that was an amazing journey because I got to see all my heroes, Glenn Denny, Tom Frost, Wayne Mary, Mark Powell, Alan Stack. And they were all super, super open to me, super helpful, super mentoring, whatever I wanted, whatever advice I've ever needed. And so I'm now working, after that book, right around the time of that book, right before it came out, in fact, I was in Yosemite and living in this little area that I lived that no one kind of knew about, and except for Dean Potter, and he showed up and we were hanging out. And I showed him a digital copy of the book, and he was amazed, and he suggested, will we make a book? And I had been asking him to make a book for years. And I go, yeah. And we started knocking the idea around what the book would be. And he was super psyched, and I was super psyched, and he was going to Europe for a few days. And then he'd be back, and we were going to talk more about the book. And he went to Europe for a few days, and he came back, and then he died base jumping in Yosemite. And that was very strong for me. So that's the book I'm working on currently. It's the book about Dean Potter. Jim Bridwell, my mentor, died. I was there when he took his last breath. As a representative of the Stonemaster, someone had to be there. And John Long asked me, since he was not in the country, and I, of course, showed up and was there. And then most recently, Charles Cole, who was going to fund the Dean Potter book, passed away. Another person who believes in you very strongly. So you lose these people, and I I think I was telling someone who I respect, have known for a short time, but, a really interesting person. And I said, it's hard when you lose people who believe in you, because, like, I kind of feel like no one believes me. And he looked at me and he goes, Dean, there's a lot of people that believe in you. And so you continue on. You continue on with your life. You continue gathering these stories and these images, and you pass them forward in the hope that, for me, in the hope that I bring art into climbing, that I inspire more art. And that's kind of like what happened with Stone Nude. So I made my last Stone Nude, and this is probably the last calendar after 20 years of making this. I've gained an incredible amount from Stone Nudes, and from climbing, and from making these books, and from my friends. And the one thing that still echoes in my head is, what do you have to give to climbing, Dean? So when I made the last photo, I kind of felt like I was at the end of a journey. I'm going to make another book, a volume 2 of Stone Nudes, but no more calendars. Because I need to start giving back a little bit more, I think. And so what I'd like to do in the next couple of years is help manifest a creative force in climbing and adventure art. And in the 20 years I've been doing Stone Nudes, people like Renan Ozturk, who is a very good friend of mine, who I met very early in his career, have made huge strides in making art. Jeremy Collins, another guy who came after I started, and Renan started. I mean, he ran the same time as Renan, I believe, maybe a little bit earlier. But anyway, Jeremy, a number of other photographers that I've kind of mentored or influenced or helped in their career. Mikey Schaefer, who I introduced to the photo editor at Patagonia very early on, before he was even thought of himself as a photographer, but I could see he had a lot of talent. And that they saw things a little differently, or that they were hopefully somewhat influenced by my path to make photographs that express the joy of your passion. And so what I would like to do is try to manifest some sort of structure that allows me to mentor artists in climbing or mountain biking or slacklining or base jumping or anything like that, who want to make a book or a film, or want to see things a little differently in their passion. If I can somehow help guide them or inspire them or give them a structure that allows for them to, or even directly support their path in gathering stories about their passions and their friends and their history, and bringing those forward, I think that I would be giving something back. And climbing is giving me my life, all my friends, all my dreams. When something gives you that, it goes beyond love. And if I can pass that out, pay it forward, if I can inspire someone, if I can, do anything like that, I would love that. And I'm going to continue making my photos of my community. I have lots of projects. I'm going to continue making the book about Dean Potter. I'm going to try to make a book about Jim Brutal. I'd love to make a book about the Stone Monkeys. I have people lined up to make things, and I have a lot of, right now in my life and my career, where I'm at, I have a lot of trust from a lot of people. And with trust, you can do anything. I can go anywhere to anyone and ask them to help with a project, and they will say yes. And I feel that in order for people to trust you in that manner, you have to have a lifetime of walking a path that shows who you are. So I feel lucky.
So you mentioned you have this Kickstarter for the
Stone Nudes.
Yeah. Have you, is this like your first foray into that kind of fundraising? No. Because the Dean Potter book, the Jim Bridwell book, mm-hmm. I just feel like those types of things.
Exactly.
I think you might be, blown away, at least pleasantly surprised at mm-hmm. the the contributions to that kind of thing. I mean, I've seen,
for sure.
I've seen the dumbest shit in the world get funded on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I did a Kickstarter before for the 2015 calendar, so that would have been 2014, and it was successful, and this one is looking very good at this moment. And I had decided exactly what you come up with, is mostly I need usually funds simply to gather the material. I would do Kickstarters for publishing, because now you're giving someone something, and I like that concept. And I think that that's the new paradigm for publishing. Honestly, you're pre-selling the book to people who want to buy your book that will allow your book to happen,
right?
Or film or what have you. And it makes a lot of sense, because you're not asking anybody for a handout. You're giving them the product. The end thing. And I think that for certain, I've thought about that quite a bit, and I've actually even talked to a number of climbing companies and publishers. I go, this is the way things are going to be done in the future. And the future is right now. I go, public funding, crowdsourcing of your books makes complete sense, because that's paying for your production costs, and then you have whatever profit you have left over. But the main thing is you're getting that book directly to the audience that wants that book.
Well, and you've got, I mean, it's I don't know how to put it. It's a specific taste, I suppose, for the Stone Nudes. But the Dean Potter book in particular, of the three you just mentioned, there's a lot of money in climbing now. Not a lot, like, compared to, other things, but compared to what you grew up in. Right. We have, people with a lot of money in our sport now, much more so. I mean, the Sprinter van, if nothing is a signifier of it, it's that thing.
This is true,
right?
Yeah.
Especially the sportsmobile ones. But anyhow, I think I just can't believe that there wouldn't be a major hunger for that to get done, and for people who contributed to see that is an important tribute, an important thing to signify in our climbing. Because Dean's
definitely an important document.
And Dean, he was controversial. He was a total maverick, but there's nobody that now can deny what influence he had on climbing.
For certain.
And if it just fades away or it goes into sort of like an annal of history, I'm just encouraging you, because that one in particular, I just can't imagine people aren't going to pony up
and I was
significant
that was
amounts of
my idea.
money just to make sure it gets done. Even if their one book isn't what they're really after.
Right, and I agree with that. And like I say, this is, it took, Dean had been around since my first book, and he's the one who introduced me to Glenn, and he helped me with as much as he could with all my projects. And so, when in discussing that book, and I'd been chasing him for years about that book, and then when he finally said, when he saw the 50s book, he goes, "You're ready, let's make this book." And we knew what kind of book, and basically it was his words and then the photos. And that's kind of what I'm going to keep it to. I've, sourced about 20,000, 25,000 of his words. And I'll add probably another 5,000 to 10,000 words in, or my editor, James Lucas, will. And I'll put in 110 photos, make it a 200-page book. But whatever, it's him talking about what he did and putting it into the timeline, so we can see the evolution when he started soloing to when he started bass soloing, free bass, as he calls it. So that book is what I'm really kind of focused on, as well as, and that one reason why I ended Stony is because I've been trying to get this book done for 2 years now, almost 3 since he died, but 2. Seriously trying to get into it, and I've been kind of shut down by various things, but I'm going to make the book. Right, it's going to happen. I have prospects out there to do that, and then I will probably kickstart it, because I do feel like, once again, like you say, but it's a matter of bringing your community together for those projects, and then I want to use that as a model for further projects within the climbing arts.
Well, Dean, for God's sake, kickstart some money in there for you. It's okay. It's okay to pay yourself something to do these projects. Okay?
I'm always broke at the end of the project.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's not some.
I'm happy and depressed at the same time.
You're not like disrespecting anyone's memory or anything by making some money off there. It's okay. All right. If you need to see another therapist about it, just like Kickstart. I mean, honestly, there's a chunk of that change has to go to your operating cost, aka paying yourself to do it. All right.
I have. I got to tell you this little story about.
Is that
me.
okay?
Yeah. I live in El Portal right now in Yosemite. El Portal,
Which is threatened
by fire
at this moment. Yeah.
But I'm actually caretaker at Sean Leary's place.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Leary is a really good friend of mine, and he died in a base jumping accident. Super talented climber and just an amazing human being. Mm-hmm. So the other day, I have been supporting myself for a number of years by mopping floors 3 nights a week at the Iwani for Best Bet, which is Ken Yeager, who's the Yosemite Climbing Association. And I work 3 nights a week, like 2 hours a night, and he paid me very well. Pretty good, actually. And so the chemicals would eat through my 5'10" shoes. And anyway, the job ended because he lost that particular contract. But and so I didn't have any money for shoes, and I didn't know anyone at 5'10" because they moved to Europe. And so I was looking around the house, and I found a right guide tenny that looked pretty good, that had been used but looked good. Then I dug around the house for a bit more, and I found a left guide tenny, but they were from 2 different years, but they fit, and they were Sean's, right? And so I've been wearing them. I don't have them on now, but they're outside. But anyway, been wearing them, and I was in Yosemite, and someone walked up to me, and they looked down at my shoes, and they go, huh, those are 2 different shoes. I go, yeah. And they go, so someone lost 2 different shoes. And I go, no, I found 2 different shoes. And so it's like, one of my favorite Potter stories, and I have a ton of Potter stories because we adventured hard, but one of my favorite ones was he was in Europe, and we were emailing back and forth, and he was coming back on a particular day, and he wanted to talk to me, just hang out. And I said, well, I have to go to Southern California really early that next morning because I think I found someone, and this was Mike Graham, who was going to publish the Stonemaster book, and I don't want to miss this meeting, and I got to go early, and I go, and I might be away a little bit because I don't have any money, but I'll be back, and we'll hang, and he goes, I want you to go sleep at my house. He had these 2 places in Yosemite West, and go sleep up there. I'll be there in the morning, I want to talk to you. All right. So I went up there, and right about 4 a.m, right before I was going to get up, I hear this monkey call. Ooh. And I knew it was him. I knew his call, and I hear this coffee, and so I hooted back and got dressed and went down there, and he had made coffee for me, and we just talked quietly about his trip and about some future plans we had to make some photos. And I go, I better go. It's getting light. And he looked at me, and he had this this belt that he always used to wear. It was a piece of 1-inch full strength webbing. And he goes, hey, whoa, wait a minute. And he took off the belt.
I remember it from the some of the photos.
From some of the films and photos. So he took off the belt. He goes, hang on a second. And, the ends were burned together, and he takes a knife and he cuts off one end. And he works the webbing, and he pulls out 2 $100 bills. And he goes, here. And, I didn't want to take his money, but I didn't have any money. I had enough gas to get down there, maybe enough to get halfway back. So I took the money, and I said, hey, man, I'll pay you back. And he goes, no, keep it. And I go, hey, why do you have that money in there like that? He goes, you never know when they're going to be chasing you.
All right, folks, thanks for coming along on that journey with Dean. Pretty good stuff there. Again, I want to thank him for sitting down. It was a lot of fun, and he really was instrumental in making it happen, making sure that I knew he was in town and giving me the time to come up to Boulder and a place to do it through our mutual friend, Lynn Hill. So that was super fun being there and talking to Dean. I hope you guys dug it. Okay, remember, Haven't talked to you about this in a while. You can help out the Enormocast by going to enormocast.com and clicking on the Help Out tab, seeing what you can do to help out the podcast. It's amazing. I ask you guys to do this, and the amount of reviews, almost entirely positive reviews, on my iTunes page is astounding. It's like it nukes a lot of other supposedly more popular podcasts than mine, the amount of reviews I have. And I think that's important to iTunes. But as usual with lots of Apple stuff, nobody knows. Nobody knows how it all works. It's just a big old secret. Anyhow, but thanks for doing that. You can also donate if you wish, and a few other things to help the podcast. Blah, blah, blah. And a few other things to help the podcast maintain and gain popularity. I'm like some little poor middle school nerd that just dreams of being popular. You need to help me out. Okay, speaking of nerds, you nerds are out climbing. And of course, the summer is winding down here in the United States of America into, hopefully not too long, into the beautiful fall time. The fall is beautiful everywhere. It is the time to climb in much of North America. And if you happen to be in another hemisphere, somewhere else where you're looking forward to the glorious spring in the end of the cold, dark times. Either way, look, you have to pay attention all the time, every time you climb. Even if it feels like just a lazy sport climbing day, pay attention, please. Maybe just like the moment you get out of your truck or your van or whatever, just meditate for like 25 seconds, a minute. Clear your head, remind yourself. It's time to pay attention. Here, do it with me right now. 25 seconds. Okay. Was it worth it? Maybe saving your ass or saving your partner's ass? I don't know if it'll work anyway, but that was fun. All right. Don't forget to check your knot.
Okay, everyone, let's get started. Yes, beautiful, feeling it. Let's get some smiles. It's all in here. That's it, yes. Let's let the inside out. Okay, you're an animal. Yes, there we go. You're a tiger. You're Tony the tiger. You're great. Very good. Loving it. Now you're a lemur. Running as a pack. Yes, we go left. We go right. Yes. There's a predator out of the jungle. What's going on? Burrow! That's right, you're a lemur. It's all you've got. You don't have sharp teeth capable of biting. Make an interconnected series of tunnels like the Viet Cong. And look. I'm not even shooting you. It's crazy. And I'm spent.